The sound of chains echoed in the yard as Elijah stood frozen, his heart pounding like thunder in his chest. The morning sun rose slowly, throwing long shadows on the dirt ground, and every breath he took felt heavier than the last. His wife, Mary, stood only a few steps away, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with fear. They had always stayed close to each other, no matter how hard life got, no matter how cruel the world had been to them. But today, something inside Elijah knew that everything was about to change forever. The trader's voice rang out deep and cold as he shouted prices to the small crowd. Elijah's hands shook as he tried to move forward, but two guards stood between him and Mary. He wanted to call out, to tell her to run, to tell her to fight, but she just looked at him, quietly, bravely. She was trying to be strong for him, even when her own heart was breaking. When the man at the front of the crowd lifted his hand and said, $3, Elijah's world shattered. $3. That was all they thought she was worth. The woman who sang to him at night, who prayed with him every morning, who had once risked her life to protect a child that wasn't even her own. The woman who had been his light in every dark hour. He screamed her name, his voice filled with pain and rage, but the guards held him down. His knees hit the ground. Dust rose around him. He shouted again, "My wife!" And the sound echoed through the air like a wound that would never heal. Mary turned her head one last time as they pulled her away. Her eyes were wet, her lips trembling, but she smiled through her tears. A small, broken smile meant only for him. It was her way of saying, "Don't forget me. Don't give up." And then she was gone. The cart rolled down the road, the sound of its wheels fading into the distance until all Elijah could hear was the wind. He fell silent. The men around him moved on as if nothing had happened. The world kept turning. But for Elijah, time stopped that day. The air around him grew still and his chest felt empty. For hours he sat in the same place, staring at the road where she had disappeared. His hands still shook, and the sound of his own heartbeat seemed to echo in his ears like a drum. A man came by and told him to stand, to move, but he didn't hear. He only saw Mary, her blue dress fluttering in the wind, her face pale but strong, her spirit unbroken even as she was taken. Later that night, Elijah sat by the small fire behind the barn. The stars shone above, cold and distant, and he thought about all the things he never got to say to her. He thought about how she used to laugh, how her voice filled their tiny cabin with warmth, how she used to braid her hair before bed. Every little thing became a memory he clung to as if it were life itself. He whispered her name softly into the dark, afraid the wind might carry it away. "Mary," he said, and his voice cracked. "I'll find you." Days turned into weeks, and Elijah was not the same man anymore. He worked in silence, his eyes always scanning the road, his mind always wandering. Every time a cart passed by, he stopped what he was doing and looked up, hoping to see her face again. He didn't care about the danger, didn't care about the rules. The only thing that kept him alive was the thought that somewhere, Mary might still be waiting for him. One night, while the others slept, Elijah went to the old stable where an older man named Samuel worked. Samuel had once been free long ago, and knew how to read maps and follow the stars. Elijah knelt beside him and said in a low voice, "I have to find her. I can't live without her." Samuel looked at him for a long time before speaking. "If you go," he said, "there's no coming back. The world out there doesn't show mercy." Elijah's answer came without a pause. "Then I'll take the risk." The old man sighed, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of cloth. "Take this," he said. It was hers. She dropped it when they dragged her past me. Elijah took it in shaking hands. It was blue, the same color as her dress, the same one she had worn the day she was taken. He pressed it to his chest, and for the first time since that morning he felt her close again. That night Elijah planned his escape. He didn't sleep. He waited until the moon was high and the guards were drowsy. The wind blew through the tall grass, carrying the faint smell of pine and earth. He moved quietly, each step careful, each sound measured. He knew the path Samuel had told him, north toward the river, then follow the stars until he reached the next town. From there, he would ask questions, search faces, follow any rumor that mentioned a woman sold near the trading posts. Before dawn, he reached the edge of the forest. The first rays of sunlight were breaking through the trees, painting the sky with gold. Elijah stopped and looked back one last time. The fields lay behind him, silent and gray, and the only sound was the whisper of the wind through the leaves. He whispered again, "Mary," and then he stepped into the trees. The forest was cold and deep. He moved through it for days, living off berries and streams, sleeping under roots and stars. His clothes tore, his hands bled, but he never stopped. Every time he felt weak, he remembered her voice, soft, calm, filled with love. "You're stronger than you think," she used to tell him. "God doesn't forget those who keep walking." So he walked. One afternoon, as he reached a quiet stream, he met a young woman washing clothes in the water. She looked frightened when she saw him, but when he showed her Mary's blue cloth, her eyes widened. "I saw her," she whispered, "a few days ago, near the river crossing. She was with a man in a gray hat." Elijah's heart leapt. For the first time, he had a direction, a trace of hope. He thanked her and moved on, his pace quickening with each step. The pain in his body didn't matter anymore. The fear didn't matter. Only finding her mattered. As night fell again, the sound of the river grew louder ahead. He followed it, his feet slipping in the mud, his breath short but his heart burning. Somewhere out there, Mary was alive. Somewhere beyond the hills, she might be dreaming of him too. He looked up at the stars and felt the tears run down his face. "I'm coming," he whispered. "No matter how far, no matter how long, I'm coming." The moon climbed high over the dark trees, lighting his path through the shadows. Elijah's figure moved slowly but with purpose, guided by faith, by memory, and by love strong enough to cross any distance. The road ahead was dangerous, but he didn't care. His heart was no longer lost. It had something to live for again. And though he didn't know what waited beyond that river, he believed deep inside that one day soon he would see her again. The wind was cold that morning when Elijah reached the river. Mist floated above the water and the sound of rushing current filled the air. He stood still for a long time, trying to see through the fog, his hands holding the small blue cloth close to his heart. His clothes were torn, his face tired, but his eyes still held the same fire, the kind that love can keep alive even when everything else fades. He knew she was somewhere ahead. He could feel it across the river. A small town lay hidden under the early light. Smoke rose from chimneys and a few horses stood tied to a post. Elijah knew this must be the trading post the young woman had spoken of. He stepped into the cold water, feeling the current pull at his legs, but he didn't stop. Each step brought him closer to her. The water rose to his knees, then his waist, but he pressed forward until he reached the other side, shivering and breathless. The town was quiet, built with wooden houses and dirt roads. A few people walked by, giving him strange looks, but Elijah didn't care. He went from place to place, asking softly, "Have you seen a woman named Mary? A woman in a blue dress?" Most shook their heads. One man spat on the ground and turned away, but Elijah kept searching. He went to the stables, the inn, even to the edge of the small market, calling her name in a voice that trembled with both fear and hope. Hours passed, and still there was no sign of her. His legs felt weak and his heart started to sink. He walked to the edge of town and sat near an old fence. His hands covered his face, and for a moment he felt lost again, just as he had on the day she was taken. But then he heard something faint, a voice, a soft humming sound carried by the wind. It was a tune he knew, one she used to sing when she cooked supper, when the world was quiet and safe. Elijah lifted his head slowly, his heart pounding. The sound came from behind a barn near the back of the town. He stood up and moved toward it carefully, afraid it might disappear if he moved too fast. The humming grew clearer, sweeter, trembling like a prayer. He turned the corner and stopped. There she was, Mary. She was sitting near a wooden fence, her hands washing clothes in a small bucket. Her hair was tied back, her dress old and faded, but her face was the same. The moment he saw her, his knees went weak. He whispered her name, almost afraid to say it out loud. "Mary," she froze. The cloth slipped from her hands. Slowly, she turned her head, her eyes widening as she saw him standing there. For a second, neither of them moved. The world around them disappeared. Only the two of them existed in that small space of time. Then she stood up, her lips trembling. "Elijah?" she said, her voice breaking. He ran to her. She ran to him. They met in the middle of the yard, and he wrapped his arms around her like he would never let go again. For a long time, they said nothing. She cried against his chest, her tears wetting his shirt. His hand shook as he touched her face, her hair, her shoulders, just to make sure she was real. "I found you," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I told you I would." Mary could barely speak through her tears. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said softly. "I prayed every night, Elijah. Every night. He held her tighter, his heart full of both pain and joy. God heard you, he said. He brought me here. When they finally pulled apart, she looked around nervously. You shouldn't be here, she said. If they find you... But Elijah shook his head. I don't care. I came for you. We'll leave tonight. Mary hesitated, fear flashing in her eyes. They'll come after us, she whispered. They always do. He looked into her eyes, steady and strong. Then we'll keep running, he said. As long as we're together. As the sun began to set, Elijah hid behind the barn while Mary finished her chores, pretending everything was normal. When darkness fell, she quietly slipped away, carrying a small bag of bread and water. They moved quickly through the fields, staying close to the trees, their hearts beating fast. Every sound made them freeze. Every light in the distance made them hold their breath. But the stars were bright above them, guiding their way north, the same direction Samuel had told Elijah to follow. They walked all night, hand in hand. Sometimes she stumbled and he caught her. Sometimes he fell and she helped him stand. When dawn broke, they reached the river again. They crossed it together, the cold water biting their legs, but they didn't stop. Once they were on the other side, they collapsed under a tree, too tired to move. Mary leaned against his shoulder, whispering, You really came for me. Elijah smiled faintly, brushing her wet hair from her face. I told you, he said softly. I'd never stop. She smiled too, a tired but beautiful smile. For the first time in weeks, they slept, side by side, safe under the open sky. Over the next few days, they walked through forests and quiet roads, avoiding the main paths. Sometimes strangers gave them bread or water. Sometimes they slept in barns, sometimes under the stars. But with each step, they felt lighter, freer. The fear began to fade, replaced by something stronger. Hope. One morning, they met an old farmer riding a wagon. He stopped when he saw them and asked where they were headed. Elijah hesitated, but the farmer's eyes were kind. He offered them a ride north, saying he knew a place where people could live free. Elijah looked at Mary and she nodded. They climbed onto the wagon, sitting close together as the wheels began to turn. As the wagon rolled down the dusty road, Mary looked at the horizon. Do you think we'll ever stop running? She asked quietly. Elijah took her hand and squeezed it gently. Maybe one day, he said. But for now, we keep moving. As long as we're together, that's enough. The journey was long, but they made it. After many days, they reached a quiet valley surrounded by mountains and trees. There, a small group of kind people welcomed them, gave them food, and let them stay. It was not a grand place, but it was peaceful. The air was clean, and no one raised their voice or looked at them with cruelty. For the first time in their lives, they could breathe without fear. They built a small cabin near a stream. Elijah worked the land, planting vegetables, fixing fences, and helping neighbors. Mary took care of the home, singing again as she used to, her voice soft and warm. Every evening they sat by the fire, watching the sunset turn the sky red and gold. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. They just held hands and listened to the wind. Years passed. Their hair turned gray, their hands grew wrinkled, but their love never faded. People in the valley often said they had never seen two souls so deeply bound. Children loved to visit their cabin to hear Mary's gentle stories about hope, courage, and the power of never giving up. One summer evening, Elijah sat by the window as Mary hummed her old song. The same tune she had sung the day he found her again. He smiled, remembering everything. The river, the stars, the road that had brought them there. He reached for her hand and said softly, You see, Mary, love is stronger than anything. Even when they tried to break us, we found our way. Mary looked at him, her eyes shining in the firelight. We did, she said. And we always will. Outside, the stars began to appear again, the same ones that had guided him through the darkness all those years ago. Elijah leaned back, feeling peace settle in his heart. He had lost everything once, but love had led him home. And in that quiet valley, under the same endless sky, the two of them lived out the rest of their days, free together, and forever bound by a love that no one could ever sell or take away.